I'm Richard Saja. I'm a fine art embroiderer and I live in Queens, New York.
Now, when I was young, I really loved making things, and I would really, as a child, I went the extra mile in school with projects. I didn't really like school too much, but when it came to creating something, whether it was like a diorama of like a monster dungeon or like a little TV that sat on my shoulder so that I could pretend I was on TV to be talking about something, I would just sort of take the ball and run with it. I was obsessed with monsters always. I had a very large collection of rubber monsters. I would make dungeons for them and haunted houses out of shoeboxes with all of the, the necessary accoutrement that you would find in a haunted house. When I graduated high school, I went to art school to study surface design. So I was doing a lot of printing on fabric and then making things out of the prints, whether apparel, floor cloths, that kind of thing. And that was good, but I realized that I really was hungering for a good education. I took classes at the Philadelphia College of Art in surface design specifically, just creating patterns and textures on fabric, and then sometimes making clothes out of them, just sometimes letting them be as they were. Sort of at the same time, I started doing ceramics, which again I had a facility for because it was hand building. It was a very tactile, process-oriented craft. So I loved working with ceramics. I decided to move away from the East Coast where I had lived for 18, 19 years, and I wound up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where a friend of mine had just started college. I was sleeping on the floor of a friend's dorm room, and he said, "Why don't you come and sit in on my classes?" And it was a tiny little liberal arts college called St. John's. I applied there and graduated 4 years later. Just very well educated, but not really prepared to do anything. So I taught myself Photoshop and Illustrator. Took a year and a half to do that while I waited tables, and then I moved to New York City and got a job as the assistant to the creative director of a Japanese ad agency. So I did that for a couple of years and then was laid off. When I was laid off, I was in the Bay Area with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how we loved textiles, and she suggested that maybe we should start something together, maybe a cushion company where I would be the creative end and she would be the business end. And so I came up with 10 different styles of cushions. One of those 10 styles was a hand-embroidered toile, where I would take a very traditional toile print, which is an 18th century fabric pattern that's usually very pastoral, bucolic scenes of people working in fields, dancing around a maypole, dancing. But the idea was to to embellish it with embroidery and make it stand out. We debuted the collection at the International Gift Show about a year later, and straight out of the gate, my embroidered toile got a lot of attention, both from ID Magazine, the New York Times. It was such a basic idea and no one had done it before. I found that I could use thread the way other people use paint or pens or really any medium. I look at embroidery as sort of drawing or painting with thread, and I find that toile is a great medium for the embroidery in that a lot of it is repetition because of the pattern, so I can keep doing the same pattern over and over again, different iterations, and exploring themes. I was really small in the late 60s, so I watched a lot of Batman, a lot of Lost in Space, and I feel like those shows really sort of, in a way, influenced my aesthetic very much, both color-wise and thematically, there are a lot of monsters. I've always been obsessed with monsters, and the monsters that I create, they're never scary or threatening. They always seem to be more vulnerable and reaching out for understanding somehow. Sort of like the scene in Frankenstein where it comes upon the little girl playing, and everyone thinks, oh, he's going to kill her, but he just actually doesn't kill her at first anyway. He sort of plays with her, and then he winds up killing her. But I'm doing a series now that's sort of like a history of punk rock. So I'm doing a gutter punk piece, a goth piece, and then a fashion sort of Vivienne Westwood piece. It's just great to take something that's old, to tweak it in such a way to make it new again for an audience, and sort of to inject something funny into it, something a little unexpected, and to do it well. Over the years, my stitching has I've become much more specific about what I'm trying to accomplish, so I get very nitpicky. It takes much longer than it used to make a piece because I spend so much more time with it. So I'm glad that the work has splintered off to have this fine art aspect to it, because it doesn't bother me to spend a lot of time on a piece that will be shown on a wall rather than just something that will be a cushion in someone's home where no one's going to see it. My work is really it gives me the most comfort and solace and joy out of everything I do in my life. Before my career really took off, my liberal arts education was the thing that I was most proud of, but with the embroidered toile, I can actually say that it's something that I do that's uniquely my own. No one does what I do in this world, or if they do, they don't do it in the same way. I mean, there's certainly people that work with toile, but the embroidery I feel I've made uniquely my own, and from what I can tell, what I've seen, people can't really even knock me off successfully when they try. They don't have the grace and elegance and humor that I'm able to instill into my work. And so I find it very flattering when interviews appear either online or in print, and reading comment fields or people getting in touch with me and talking about how inspirational they find my work to be. I mean, that's really what makes it great. I mean, for me, I'm exploring themes of what I'm interested in, and I do exist in a vacuum. I sit here in this room and I embroider for hours at a time, for days at a time, and I don't talk to people. So to get feedback where people are saying, like, I find your work incredibly inspirational, I don't even know what that means necessarily regarding their work, but I think there's a freedom and a playfulness and a real spirit that shines through, and I think maybe that's what they're responding to. I'm just exploring themes that I'm interested in, and if somehow that's able to be translated just with a photograph or by viewing a piece in person, I think then that really makes it all worthwhile somehow, because it means that I've come out of the vacuum and I have been able to transcend sort of the burden of creating in order to pass it on to the next person. My true passion is to really spend a month on one piece of toile that will go to a museum or a gallery. Yes.